Intro music fades in and out. Dramatic. Reflective. Opening shot. Black and white footage of the Berlin Wall being constructed. Barbed wire. Concrete blocks. Pan across a desolate death strip. Narrator. Imagine a city brutally severed. A nation torn in two for nearly 3 decades. A concrete scar, fortified with watchtowers and armed guards, ran through the heart of Berlin. A stark, physical manifestation of the Cold War's ideological divide. This was the Berlin Wall, a symbol of oppression, a barrier to freedom, and for millions, a daily reminder of a world held captive by fear. But then, in a moment that defied belief, it crumbled, not with a bang, but with a whimper, and a flood of human emotion that reshaped history. How did the impossible become reality? How did a wall, designed to last 1,000 years, fall in a single night? This is the story of November 9th, 1989, the night the world watched, held its breath, and then erupted in joyous disbelief as the Berlin Wall finally fell. Visual. Map of post-World War II Germany. Divided into occupation zones. Zoom into Berlin. Also divided. Narrator. To understand the wall's demise, we must first comprehend its origins. Following the devastation of the Second World War, Germany, and its capital Berlin, were carved into 4 Allied occupation zones: American, British, French, and Soviet, while the Western zones gradually coalesced into the Federal Republic of Germany, or West Germany. The Soviet zone became the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany, a staunchly communist state subservient to Moscow. Berlin, situated deep within East German territory, remained a unique anomaly, a 4-sector city, with West Berlin functioning as an island of Western democracy and capitalism, surrounded by communist East Germany. Visual. Archival photos of people crossing between East and West Berlin easily in the 1950s. Then, sudden imagery of barbed wire appearing overnight. Narrator. This open border in Berlin proved problematic for the East German regime. Between 1949 and 1961, an estimated 2.7 million East Germans, many of them skilled professionals and young people, fled to the West, seeking better economic opportunities and personal freedoms. This mass exodus, known as Republikflucht, or flight from the Republic, threatened the very economic and social fabric of East Germany. The Soviet Union and its East German allies saw only one solution: seal the border. Compelling historical fact 1. The Berlin Wall was initially built overnight, surprising citizens on Sunday, August 13, 1961. Barbed wire fences were hastily erected, followed by concrete blocks, effectively severing streets, railway lines, and families without warning. One day, citizens moved freely. The next, they woke to an impenetrable barrier. Visual. Close-ups of early wall construction. Soldiers. Distraught families on both sides. People waving across the divide. Narrator. The wall wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a psychological weapon. Families were separated, friends divided, and entire communities ripped apart. West Berlin became an isolated outpost, a defiant symbol of freedom in the heart of communist Europe. The East German authorities, primarily the Ministry for State Security, or Stasi, enforced the border with brutal efficiency. The infamous death strip, a cleared area behind the wall, riddled with booby traps, anti-vehicle trenches, and patrolled by armed guards with shoot-to-kill orders, made escape a terrifying gamble. Visual images of the death strip, watchtowers, armed guards. Then, shots of successful and failed escape attempts, tunnels, hot air balloons, cars crashing through. Narrator. Despite the immense danger, the human spirit of defiance persisted. Over the years, countless East Germans attempted daring escapes. Through tunnels, in hot air balloons, by swimming across canals, or even by attempting to ram vehicles through checkpoints. Compelling historical fact 2. Over 100,000 people attempted to escape East Germany via the wall, with historical estimates suggesting at least 140 were killed trying to cross, though some sources put the number much higher, including those who died trying to cross the entire inner German border. These tragic figures underscore the desperation and courage of those yearning for freedom, and the brutal reality of life under the wall. Visual footage of daily life in East Berlin. Drab buildings, queues, Stasi surveillance. Contrast with vibrant West Berlin. Narrator. Life in East Germany was characterized by state control, limited consumer goods, and pervasive surveillance. The Stasi, a vast secret police organization, maintained an iron grip on the populace, with an estimated 1 in 63 citizens acting as an informant by 1989. Dissent was ruthlessly suppressed. Yet, beneath this veneer of control, discontent simmered. People yearned for the prosperity and freedoms they glimpsed from West German television, which was widely accessible in East Berlin and other border regions. Visual. Mikhail Gorbachev on screen. Footage of protests in Hungary. Then mass gatherings in Leipzig, East Berlin. Narrator. The seeds of change began to sprout in the mid-1980s. Not from within East Germany, but from Moscow. Mikhail Gorbachev, who became General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1985, introduced radical reforms, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. These policies, intended to revitalize the Soviet system, inadvertently began to unravel the entire Eastern Bloc. Gorbachev also signaled a crucial shift in Soviet foreign policy, making it clear that Moscow would no longer intervene militarily to prop up faltering communist regimes in Eastern Europe, a departure from the Brezhnev doctrine. Visual. People streaming across the Hungarian-Austrian border. Footage of the Monday demonstrations in Leipzig. Narrator. This new Soviet stance emboldened other satellite states. In May 1989, Hungary began dismantling its border fence with Austria, creating the first tangible breach in the Iron Curtain. This opening became a lifeline for thousands of East Germans. Instead of risking the wall, they holidayed in Hungary, then simply walked across the newly opened border into Austria, and from there, to West Germany. The trickle became a flood, with tens of thousands fleeing throughout the summer and autumn of 1989, often through West German embassies in Prague and Warsaw. The East German regime, led by the ailing Erich Honecker, was caught flat-footed, clinging stubbornly to its hardline policies, even as its citizens literally walked away. Visual. Ronald Reagan at the Brandenburg Gate, delivering his "Tear Down This Wall" speech. Narrator. Amidst this growing unrest, a powerful symbolic moment occurred 2 years earlier. On June 12, 1987, standing before the Brandenburg Gate, a mere stone's throw from the Berlin Wall, U.S. President Ronald Reagan delivered a speech that would become etched in history. He declared, compelling historical fact 3. Ronald Reagan's iconic speech at the Brandenburg Gate in 1987, where he famously challenged Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev with the words, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," single quote, is widely seen as a powerful prophetic moment, though its direct influence on the wall's fall is debated. It certainly captured the spirit of the times. These words resonated deeply, not just in the West, but subtly, profoundly, behind the Iron Curtain. Visual footage of protests in East Berlin, specifically at Alexanderplatz. Shots of Honecker and then Egon Krenz. Narrator. By late 1989. The pressure was immense. Mass demonstrations, known as the Monday demonstrations, swelled in cities like Leipzig, demanding reforms and freedom to travel. On October 9, 1989, over 70,000 people marched in Leipzig, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people," a direct challenge to the party's authority. The regime, accustomed to crushing dissent, hesitated. Just days later, on October 18, Erich Honecker, the long-serving hardline leader, was forced to resign, replaced by Egon Krenz, who promised reforms but struggled to regain control. Visual. Günter Schabowski at the press conference, looking somewhat flustered. Close up on the document he's reading from. Narrator. The situation was spiraling. To defuse the crisis, the East German government decided to ease travel restrictions, hoping to placate the populace without opening the floodgates entirely. They drafted new regulations, allowing citizens to apply for visas to travel abroad, including to West Germany, without requiring a specific reason. The plan was for these new regulations to be announced the following day, November 10, with time for border guards to be briefed and an orderly process established. Visual. Schabowski reading the note. Reporters looking confused. Close up on Schabowski's face as he says sofort, unverzüglich. Narrator. But then came the fateful evening of Thursday, November 9, 1989. Günter Schabowski, a relatively new and somewhat unprepared Politburo member, was tasked with announcing the new travel regulations at a live televised press conference in East Berlin. He had been handed the draft document just moments before the press conference began and hadn't fully reviewed it. Towards the end of the lengthy conference, a journalist, Ricardo Ehrman of Answer News Agency, asked about the new travel law. Schabowski, fumbling through his papers, eventually read out the key passage, stating that East German citizens could apply to leave the country without special conditions. Compelling historical fact 4. The fall of the Berlin Wall was largely accidental, precipitated by a major miscommunication. Günter Schabowski, an East German Politburo member, mistakenly announced at a live press conference on November 9, 1989, that new travel regulations allowing citizens to cross the border would take effect immediately, without delay, when the actual plan was for them to be implemented the following day after proper briefings. Narrator. Then came the pivotal moment. Another journalist, Peter Brinkmann of Bild Zeitung, pressed him. When does this come into force? Schabowski, looking genuinely surprised and consulting his notes again, replied, "As far as I know, it's immediately, without delay." He had misread the internal memo. which specified the changes would take effect the next day. The room erupted. Journalists scrambled, and the news flashed across international wires and television screens. Berlin Wall open. Quote. Visual. Crowds gathering at Bornholmer Straße. Then other checkpoints. Footage of people climbing the wall. Celebrating. Hugging guards. Narrator. The news spread like wildfire. East German television had not yet reported it, but West German TV and radio, widely watched and listened to in East Berlin, immediately broadcast Schabowski's announcement. Within hours, thousands of East Berliners, initially tentative, began to gather at the various border crossings, demanding passage. The border guards, completely unbriefed and utterly bewildered by the news, had no orders. They called their superiors, who called theirs, all the way up the chain of command. But no one knew what to do. The Politburo had gone home, believing the announcement was for the next day. Compelling historical fact 5. The first border crossing to officially open on the night of November 9, 1989, was Bornholmer Straße, faced with an overwhelming and increasingly agitated crowd of thousands. The commanding officer, Harald Jaeger, made the courageous decision to open the barrier without orders, fearing a stampede. Narrator. At Bornholmer Straße, one of the main crossings, the crowd swelled to an unstoppable tide. Faced with the choice of using force against their own people or opening the gates, the commanding officer, Harald Jaeger, without receiving any explicit orders, made the momentous decision at 10:45 p.m. to open the barrier. He had no other choice. The first East Germans surged through, met by ecstatic West Berliners, who offered flowers, champagne, and hugs. The dam had broken. Visual. Montage of people chipping away at the wall. Mauerspekt. Dancing on top of it. Wide shots of the Brandenburg Gate with crowds. Narrator. What followed was an explosion of joy that captivated the world. East and West Berliners, strangers a moment before, embraced in tears. People climbed atop the wall near the Brandenburg Gate, dancing and cheering. Others began chipping away at the concrete with hammers and chisels, the Mauerspekt, or wall peckers taking home souvenirs of a vanquished tyranny. The wall, for so long a symbol of division, now became a canvas for celebration, its concrete crumbling under the weight of human liberation. Visual. German reunification ceremony. Modern Berlin, with remnants of the wall as memorials. Narrator. The fall of the Berlin Wall was more than just the opening of a border. It was the symbolic end of the Cold War. It catalyzed the collapse of communist regimes across Eastern Europe and paved the way for German reunification, which officially occurred on October 3, 1990. The world watched in awe as a chapter of history closed, and a new one began. The wall's demise demonstrated the power of popular protest, the fragility of oppressive regimes, and the undeniable human yearning for freedom. Visual. Reflective shot of a preserved section of the Berlin Wall, perhaps with art on it. End with a hopeful, modern shot of Berlin. Narrator. Today, only fragments of the Berlin Wall remain, preserved as memorials and open-air galleries. A permanent reminder of the sacrifices made and the freedom gained. The story of November 9, 1989, is a testament to how quickly the seemingly immutable can dissolve, how a single misspoken phrase can alter the course of history, and how the collective will of a people can, against all odds, tear down the most formidable of barriers. It reminds us that even the darkest walls eventually fall, giving way to the light of hope and unity. The echoes of those jubilant cries, "Wir sind das Volk," single quote, continue to resonate, a timeless reminder of freedom's enduring power. Outro music fades in, uplifting, hopeful,